SN entered our lives, and we bonded over Rasmus Ristolainen's horrendous possession numbers, and that's all we talked about for 11 years. Now I feel like I get my most Travis through, like, Bills takes. I don't want to say hot takes because I don't want to, be negative toward Travis. I love Travis, but, it's like, it's the injuries or it's just the circumstances with the Bills. There's this angst. Travis has revealed himself as a Bills fan to us, and now when his name pops up on my feed, it's about how, they're not getting open.
Yeah, you're commenting way more regularly on my posts or commenting on things you heard on the show and other people's Bills-related posts than I've seen. Is this a sign of some sort of deteriorating mental health?
100%. It's also a sign I've been on the bike a lot more. And I got to be honest, one thing that I have done over the last couple of years, I kind of got sick of listening to music on my runs and biking, and I started listening more to random sports shows, and not to blow smoke. You guys are not just my favorite tandem. You're my favorite tandem on GR too. Wow. You guys do a great job. But I will say, you guys are much more optimistic about the Bills right now than I am, and I think that's saying something.
So, I was talking to Matt Collar today on his podcast, Purple Insider, and we were talking about just the Vikings. His show is about the Vikings and the Bills. And I basically, he used to work here, as you may know, and I said, I just don't really want to, I don't feel it, and I don't want to be heard saying that they won't get there. Because they might, that's maybe in some certain way a weakness on my part to not just want to rule them out. It's very easy to do that. Lots of fans do it. And what are their odds of being right? 90%? That at one point or another, the Bills will lose and stop short of their goal. I just really don't think that it has to end that way, and therefore, I don't want to be heard writing them off. So maybe I am still, or maybe Bulldog is too, more optimistic than you are, but I'd want you to know that there's a part of the equation that is this broadcast, that it's not. I do think it wouldn't be right to write them off, but I mean,
it might be easier to write them off. We weren't in here talking about them 20 hours a week.
I appreciate the concern. I get it.
Yeah.
How's that?
Well, I think a couple things, right? Like I always have to caution myself because I can be a little more skeptical in the wrong way than I think. I think it's good to live life optimistically. Like I do mean that glass half full type approach, but. I'm hearing a lot of I'll borrow a couple things I've heard from you boys this week.
Right.
The Bills are dominant in December. True, right? Counterpoint, this team doesn't look anything like the teams of the last 4 or 5 years. Even when a couple of years ago when they were, 6-5 and 6-6, felt like they were on their heels to the nth degree. I felt like that team was materially better. They were a dumb mistake factory, but man, they can move the ball up and down the field. This team cannot in most scenarios. And, I kind of, you guys both know this. I went to that Texans game, and so I can see there is some recency bias here.
Yes.
But they look so slow and so old at so many positions, and this whole it's a one-player team. I think in years past, I think that was maybe a little bit unfair. Early years to Allen, maybe a little unfair to the defense. And then certainly in the early 2020s, I think Allen had decent weapons around him. But, wow, does it feel true right now? It is, and I was talking to Bulldog about that. I tweeted him 2 days ago. The part that I'm having a really hard time swallowing, because I agree, the AFC does not look very good. By the way, I think the exact same thing is true for the Eastern Conference and the Buffalo Sabres, by the way. Their competition doesn't look very good, and there are holes everywhere. And, this still is a 7-win team, but there's two things I pause on, which is they have really looked good one game this entire season against Tampa Bay. And two, going back, like when I look at this roster and I look at the talent and I say, how does this talent compare? The one thing I think I do a lot, I mean, I watch a ton of football. I got the quad box on every week. I really enjoy it. I center my Sundays around it. They are just so devoid of talent at so many positions. And that's not to be like painfully negative, but there are onesie, twosie guys at certain positions, Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, where, they're above average players at the position. There's no doubt about that. But I have tremendous, tremendous difficulty finding where the talent is across most of the defense at this point, and I get that injuries have played a big role there. The wide receiver room is a complete disaster. I think that's been talked about ad infinitum at this point. The offensive line is regressing at the absolute worst time. It was probably the most reliable thing outside of Allen. And there's too many, like, not even great players, just call them average to above average players that are constantly in and on and off the injury report every single week and missing games. And, like, I will say all that in the box. Like, I know everyone's talked about how important this game is against the Steelers. I'm genuinely worried about this game against the Steelers. I think they can lose this game against the Steelers. They have lost against far worse teams and have looked worse in many games this season in a way in years past where they would routinely outplay teams, and in those stupid losses, they were quote-unquote stupid losses. They are just losing these games this year, and I don't think that's something we've had to wrestle with for 5 years, 6 years, I think is fair.
Yeah, I think that's all. I think that's all pretty on the nose, Travis. I think you
Me
reference in the setup of that 6-6 2 years ago, and I guess I would have to cop to this. Maybe a part of my not being able to see some of what you're describing is because when they were 6-6 and lost that overtime game to Philadelphia, that was like a breaking point for me. And I thought, like, I can't keep doing this with McDermott. I got to move on. And then they ran the table. And I sort of felt like I've been backing away from that for the last 2 years. And so I guess I'm reluctant to be too quick to this team is in real trouble. I'm just figuring that they'll figure it out. But you make a certain good point here.
That is a fascinating dichotomy because I think that was totally fair to be, and I think for years the skepticism around this team has really centered around the head coach. But maybe I was a little too bullish and figuring that they could figure it out back then, and it wasn't that I was super optimistic at that moment. But I think the other side of that coin is where I'm right now, which is
the roster.
I have severe trepidation about the talent around the quarterback and on the defense in a way that I think the GM we you guys have talked about this at length in a good way, but I think the GM made serious miscalculations about this roster, and coupled with this just nonstop injury bug that has plagued the defense for 3 years, which, by the way, in any one season, and I think it's true in hockey, football, whatever the case, you deal with an injury bug, you deal with cluster injuries. It's almost impossible to control. You can't really blame anyone. But when you are, by design or by happenstance, rolling out an older, routinely banged-up team, and then it happens again, and then also you're missing on these draft picks, which they're unequivocally, that has been one of the failure modes of this Bills team and where they're at right now. They have missed on way too many picks, especially in the last two drafts, maybe not this one. I look at this roster, and I just don't think it's very good. And I think I think one way or another, independent of people's perspective, whether they're optimistic or pessimistic, I think the entire hope for the rest of the year is, can the quarterback be Superman and pull everything through the tunnel? And I just, after watching that game Thursday, I mean, I get it. That hopefully is the bottom of it all. But
yeah,
that was a moment that I think you said it. I'm not panicked, but I am shook. I'm panicked. I am panicked after seeing that.
How great is this guy? Like, if we called Ross Tucker and asked him to go 30 minutes on the National Hockey League, you think he could do 3?
No, he'd tell you about taking his girls to watch the Hershey Bears. That's all. That would be the end of it.
How great is this guy? Got to pay it back to Travis Yost of TSN.
Well, I do think, I don't want to dwell too much longer on the Bills here, but I think the roster, I think Bean, and I thought this back in April when he went, nuclear with our guys in the morning. Like, he better be right, because he's putting a target on his own back. And not only has he missed on that, I mean, they're signing Brandon Cooks and they're trying to trade for Jalen Waddle and Lord knows who else. He, I think, has made it easier for fans to look at him skeptically now. And that has not been, you couldn't be more right. It's been McDermott. 13 seconds is the flashpoint of that, and that's understandable. So it's always been McDermott, and Bean is kind of just coasted by. And I think that started changing when he opened fire on the wide receiver room in general. And now you're looking more skeptically at everything he's done, I think.
I think I don't know if credit's the right thing. At least, again, a two-sided coin. It's clear as day to me that now the front office has recognized, yeah, we misfired here, and the wide receiver room is a clear problem. And I think that, Bean will address it at one point or another, going forward, whether the season they pull it out of the abyss or not. That this was a miscalculation. They're almost certainly going to invest into it this offseason, likely deeply. I think the most interesting thing, though, that's happened this season, it happened, I want to say 3-4 weeks ago, when, and I think you guys talked about it briefly, but when Bean, you expect him to. He's going to say this is a championship roster. I thought the most telling quote of the entire season was what Sean McDermott did not say about that in the same vein. He did not call this a championship team. He actually completely punted on the question. Mm-hmm. And you can call that job preservation. You can call it whatever you want. But if you're looking at this roster critically, I think like we all do, and say, hey, look, there's a clear talent gap here. Maybe Occam's razor is Sean McDermott also thinks that there's a clear talent gap at a lot of these positions, and those guns are going to point at each other one time. It's either coming now, it's coming in a few weeks. Hopefully they figure something out schematically and can work with the personnel that they have. But I think you're also starting to see, kind of pulling on that thread a little.
Yep.
Maybe the head coach and the GM not on the same page.
Sounds right. Travis Yost from TSN. So you slipped in a comment about the NHL's Eastern Conference. What did we find out yesterday? 16 teams separated by 9 points. The Sabres have 60 games to go. I said to Paul Hamilton, well, they haven't, blown their season. And he's like, well, he didn't really like that. But they haven't. I mean, they've got 60 games left, and they're a handful. They're a hot week out of a playoff spot. Yes, I know. There are lots of teams that are also that. Are you optimistic for the Sabres here, Travis? Thompson is scoring, Dahlin is back, Norris is coming, Luukkonen is looking good. A couple of guys are surprises. Samuelson is somebody that we didn't really like, but he's been good, I think. What does it look like to you?
Samuelson's been a little more than good. I think that's been one of the biggest surprises of the season. Sabres outscoring teams 22-13 with him on the ice this year. You get that. And I know he's going to spend some time now with Dahlin, which is definitely going to help a little bit. But you know what the fascinating thing to me is? There's a clear connection between, the AFC. It's who's really good here, and the Eastern Conference, which is probably worse, to be honest. Absent, Carolina and a healthy New Jersey, I think when we did our season preview, actually, I said one of the biggest tailwinds the Sabres have has nothing to do with the Sabres. That breakdown in the Atlantic Division, Tampa, Boston, Toronto, and a Florida team that is still fantastic but very injured. There was a clear recipe, and it has played out exactly that way, that these teams, these legacy teams that have had a vice grip on that division, were going to regress. Not only have they regressed, they have regressed heavily. Toronto and Boston are just miserable watches right now in all the good ways if you're a Sabres fan. And that has kept the door open for the Sabres. And by the way, drawing more Sabres-Bills parallels, I think there's some argument to be a little more optimistic about the Sabres right now. We've talked about this, there is talent across this lineup, but the 900-pound gorilla in the room was always, are they going to get the goaltending, right? And I think, in the season, in the preview, we were talking about, hey, could Alex Lyon be a guy? And I'm like, well, he's a guy. He's probably a jag, but you know how goalies are in the NHL, mm-hmm. and he's actually been one of the brightest spots at the position across the entire league to start the year. Luukkonen's put together a few good games. I wouldn't be willing to put many chips on the table in that respect, but as long as the goaltending can hold up, and now you've got guys coming back from injury. Sounds like Josh Norris is super close if he's coming back this weekend. Greenway coming back to the third or fourth line. this is a talented roster. They lose Peterka, who's been fantastic in Utah, but they get Josh Doan, who's also been fantastic in the top six. This is a team, and they have done it for a few years now, that can play with a lot of teams at even strength. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the league at even strength. I think one of the fascinating wrinkles to me in terms of, like, what does it look going forward for the Sabres, and can they actually drive themselves into the top three, top four in the division, is – number one, will the goaltending hold up? I think that is you can't understate how – that's a question for every team in the league, but it remains the biggest question for the Sabres by 100 miles, because it's just a position they haven't invested in. They're doing it with journeymen and guys who really have been up and down, and maybe up and down as a compliment to a guy like Luukkonen at this point in his career. The second piece of it is – what is going on defensively? Because I'm having, the Sabres, perhaps more than any team in the league, will trade goals right now. They're scoring goals like crazy, top 5 scoring offense at even strength in the league. I think they're last or close to last in goals against at even strength. Yet they have the best penalty kill in the league, which is a disconnect that you usually don't typically see. Good defense begets good defense everywhere. Good goaltending typically begets good goaltending everywhere. Having a bottom 5 defense at even strength, and it looks that way. It's not just in the goals against. I mean, they can be sloppy in the defensive zone on their bad days. Coupled with a penalty kill that's given up like 4 or 5 goals per 60 minutes, I mean, which is insanely good. That's Carolina Hurricanes good. I don't know where that divergence ends up, but if they can just be an average defensive team with average goaltending, they have the offensive talent to ice a playoff roster and play in a game 83. And I know that sounds absolutely insane considering how long the playoff drought has been ongoing for the Sabres, but this is not an untalented roster, especially when you've got guys like Thompson at the top of the lineup, Tuch at the top of the lineup, Norris coming back, and you really just need to cross your fingers for the injury luck there. But this is a talented team, and if never a time before, there is just not a lot of competition in the East, and this is the opportunity. I know the Sabres are on a pretty big road trip here coming up. They've got to make some headway here. The road has been a disaster for them, both in years past and this season. Got to make some headway. Regulation losses can't be the way forward. And again, I think all the opportunity lie in front of this organization.
Yeah, I think it's 8 of the next 10 are on the road, and they only have 1 road win so far this year. It was an overtime game in Detroit where Thompson just went beast mode at the end of regulation and
after we all turned the game off.
Let's one other factor that you did not mention there, Travis, is Tuch and a contract extension. The latest reporting, maybe late last week on that, I saw from Pierre LeBrun, indicated that from what he'd heard, the Sabres have not been willing to get to $10 million or above on an annual average value on a contract for Tuch, which just seems impossible to rectify. There's an argument to be made that a player at his age signing an 8-year contract at that kind of money is going to end up badly. But in the short term, the position the Sabres are in, their alternatives are what? Shop him and trade him away? I mean, close up shop. I mean, he's from Syracuse, for crying out loud. Like, watch Max Afinogenov as a kid. Like, he was the face of, we want guys who want to be here. So they need to figure that out, because that's just looming on the horizon here at some point.
Yeah, I mean, two stories here, right? Yeah, I mean, if it goes sideways the next 2-3 months, you have to move on from him, because he is a player that can corral so much at the trade deadline. But your point is totally spot on. Not only is he such a good organizational fit, not only is he a very productive two-way player, he plays very well with Tage Thompson. I mean, that first line is one of the more fun lines to watch in the league. Another line that's like 8 or 9 goals better than the opposition this year, a key reason why the Sabres have stayed afloat in the division. I think it'd be very – and by the way, like I am the last person, I promise, the last person to say, hey, overcommit on a guy because the salary cap's going up, because I killed the Maple Leafs when they did it with the core 4, because this expectation that the salary cap's always going to grow 3 to 5% every single year, I think is a canard. And as soon as it does not, you're staring down the barrel of, oh, no, we have zero cap flexibility. Look what the Edmonton Oilers are at right now, right, as one example. I think you have to swallow the pill here. And not just you can't really meet in the middle with Tuch, because he holds all the cards. Right. And he is going to get paid one way or another. And that cap flexibility argument that the Sabres should be making internally about, hey, look, if we miss here or we have to eat it on the back end, so be it, because our cap is relatively clean relative to most teams. there are plenty of teams in the league who have been dying for cap space who are going to start getting it in the next couple of years, and a guy like Tuch immediately slots into a top six. Your point is spot on, right? On a 7 or 8 year deal, I mean, the back end of that deal is almost certainly going to be rough, but he's 29, 30. I mean, he's got 3 years of playing prime at least right now, and he fits well. He's played well. He's produced well. He's reliable in all three zones. I would have a very hard time, unless the Sabres completely vomit on themselves over the next 2-3 months. I think they have to find a path to getting the deal done here.
Can't rule it out, but canard is such a great word. The judge bulldog and the natural, that's a canard. What does that mean? A prevarication. What does that mean? A lie. So good. Travis, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for finding time for us.
Happy Thanksgiving. Go Bills, guys.
And listening on his bike.
Right. Love it.
Love it. Mike Schopp and the Bulldog here. It is not Football Friday.